ActionSA Gauteng Chairperson Bongani Baloyi has resigned from the party, citing differences between him and Herman Mashaba, of course, the party leader. Mashaba as one of the reasons for his resignation. And Mashaba wanted him to relinquish his position to become national spokesperson and a member of the Senate. But Baloyi was not happy to make the move. In fact, he was on Power to Truth with JJ Tabane, and here's what he said last night, describing Mashaba as a difficult person to work with. So how is the party handling that this morning? We'll talk about that and also what's happening in Tshwane. Good to have ActionSA Chairperson Michael Beaumont with us on the show. Michael, morning. Thank you for coming in. Late night for you off the back of Tshwane. We'll talk about that in a moment. First of all, just reaction from the party from Bongani Baloyi saying that Herman Mashaba, your boss, essentially, is a difficult man to work with?
Well, I mean, we obviously watched the press conference given by Bongani, and I think, let us just say that I think Bongani is a person who's a credible individual. He's someone who we valued and have thanked for his service to ActionSA. But I think we always take with a pinch of salt when people form part of a party, you know, speak in defense of that party and then come out speaking very publicly about things that they don't really raise in the party. And I think in that particular regard, I think Bongani created himself in this press conference as a very different person to what we experienced in our time in the organization. But at the end of the day, I appreciate that that's the narrative that he wants to go and put out there.
So why did it end up like this? It sounds a bit like a divorce. Irreconcilable differences is the words being used. How did it get so messy so quickly?
Well, I think the point is that the relationship between the president and the provincial chairperson of Gauteng is a hugely important one. Gauteng is a province that ActionSA can actually be the biggest party in a coalition in 2024. It is our strongest province in South Africa. And the campaign in this province needs to be running flawlessly. And it was the opinion of the president that that wasn't taking place in this environment, and fundamentally because of the differences between Baloyi and the president. And for that reason, he had to intervene. But I think the important thing to say here is that the offer to make someone a national spokesperson was a good offer. Ultimately, Baloyi has a good track record in government, but admittedly of a very small municipality. He needed to be a household name in 2024. National spokesperson provided, a huge platform for that. And I think the idea that you can silence someone by offering them such an enormous communications platform is obviously very contradictory.
I was about to say, how did that conversation go? Because I would have imagined somebody would have jumped at a chance of being national spokesperson, knowing we got the elections coming up in 2024. You almost become the face of the brand, the face of the party. How did those discussions go?
Yeah, we were as confused as you were, because ultimately what there was an opportunity to really grow an individual's brand and position them ahead of a 2024 election where they may have been a premier candidate and a very good alternative to Panyaza Lesufi. But ultimately he felt differently, which is entirely his right. But I think, again, to point out that this is somehow some kind of dictatorial silencing of a critical voice just doesn't have any credibility when you consider what we were offering was a bigger voice and a more prominent voice within and outside of the party.
Apart from a position and let's call it a position moving upwards, was he able to voice his concerns? Because he used the term last night. I'm not sure if you've seen the interview with JJ Tabane. He used the words a democratic dictator, which in its own almost doesn't make sense. It's a juxtapose. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of fiction, so I didn't watch the interview myself. But I think from that point of view, it just doesn't make any sense. This organization has very strong people like Zwakele Mwango, Athol Trollip, General Kwena Mangope. These are people who are very strong leaders, very strong voices. And Herman Mashaba has made a point of surrounding himself with people like that. I think the difference as to why those voices are accepted, and there may have been challenges with the relationship with Baloyi, is that those voices were felt to be commenting in good faith and in the interests of the party. But as it mattered with Baloyi, there appeared to be a breakdown that actually arose from around October last year. So when you will recall, ActionSA was going through troubles with our coalition partners. We opened discussions with all political parties in South Africa. We ran a public poll on what people thought we should do. And when Herman Mashaba announced that there's no way we can work with the ANC, the relationship between Baloyi and the party fell apart. And even recently, I mean, Baloyi has...
Is that because Baloyi believed you could work with the ANC?
Absolutely, which is a strange thing, because he joined a political party that had openly campaigned on the idea that we cannot go into coalition with the ANC. So the fact that he then takes issue with that decision at a later point in time is a really strange thing for us.
Did he feel perhaps that there was a way to maneuver ActionSA to work with the ANC as a coalition? Was that maybe where it was going?
I suppose he did, and I think there was probably a level of personal disappointment there as well, because the ANC had put down a proposal where ActionSA would govern Tshwane and Baloyi himself would be the mayor. and that that the ANC would govern Joburg and the EFF at Ekurhuleni. But, ActionSA, and particularly Herman Mashaba's response, was to say there's no way we can be culpable in an ANC government in Joburg and an EFF government in Ekurhuleni. And I suspect from that moment on, the relationship really did change.
Is there a concern within ActionSA that Bongani Baloyi, now knowing the inner workings of your political party and its elections next year, could take that information to another party and use it against you?
Well, I don't really think so. I think there are no secrets in a political party. People come and go. Ultimately, we're growing because more people are coming than they are going. But at the end of the day, people leave with that kind of information, and I guess there are no secrets, especially when ActionSA has become such a threat to the established players. And there's a huge amount of interest of knowing our game plan and how we're operating, which I suppose may be well known to these individuals already. But it won't help them because our game plan is to provide an alternative to the failure of established political parties in South Africa, and they can't change the fact that they have failed.
You took me very nicely into the coalitions discussion I wanted to have with you, Michael. And next year, 2024 elections, everything now starts becoming electoral rhetoric. Everything every political party is saying. But coalitions, to my mind, seem incredibly messy. If this was the assignment before the exam being the elections, and all these coalitions are the assignments right now, I don't get a sense we're passing all that well. We're swapping mayors, we're swapping speakers. Now there's talk of 69 ballots last night being thrown out by the IEC. I don't have much confidence in next year's general elections.
It's understandable, and I think we must understand coalitions are very new in South Africa. We're having to mature very quickly, and certainly by all accounts, I don't think it's been a terrific job in the early times. But I think everyone appreciates we're heading towards a national provincial election, where we can't afford to have instability in a national government that determines, for example, economic policy of the country. And I think in that regard, the example of what happened last night wasn't an example of instability on the part of the coalition. We went there with the majority. We got a majority of votes. The IEC ruled out 69 of those votes, all of them from the coalition, and ruled that those votes were spoiled. And this group is united in going to the courts of South Africa to say this cannot stand. And I would suggest that is an example of solidarity and unity in a coalition.
So you would still believe that Kolofelo Morodi is the right one to be in this position?
Without any question. She's young, she's talented, she has excellent skills. She's the chairperson of the MPAC committee, who's investigating corruption and wrongdoing in the city of Tshwane, which ActionSA is very concerned about. And we are very proud that ActionSA could very well have our first speaker arising from the 2021 local government cycle.
And just lastly, we've been reporting that the IEC throwing out these 69 ballots because of the way they were marked. Just flesh that out for me. Was it in your mind, and I'm seeing some commentary on social media, I don't read too much into social media, but let me put the question to you, that these were deliberately spoiled in order to throw the vote?
No, I think nothing could be further from the truth. I think political parties were coming up with ways that they could account for their votes in light of what we know is vote buying taking place under the secret ballot arrangement. And there you had a political party that all 69 votes were thrown out in that particular manner. All 69 were for the coalition. And in fact, they are based on the IEC's own rules. The IEC allows a vote to be determined on the basis of whether the intent is clear. And when people put a number inside the block clearly allocated to a particular candidate, the practice across the IEC and their own published regulations make that intent clear, and the vote is cast in favour of that organisation.
Any idea when Bongani Baloyi is going next?
Not really our concern. I think we're an organisation that has a huge focus on 2024. I'm very pleased to say we met with our Gauteng PEC last night. The group is united, the group is focused. I think Funzi Ngobeni will be an excellent candidate to lead the province going forward, and our focus is to provide the alternative to failed ANC government in 2024, and it doesn't stop or slow down for one person.
Who's replacing Bongani?
Funzi Ngobeni. He's been our caucus leader in the city of Johannesburg. He was the person who actually was responsible for creating a lot of the ActionSA structures across South Africa. And I think in many ways, the result we achieved in 2021 was in large part born of his excellent brand of leadership. And we know that when we bring that brand of leadership into this province, we're going to see this province take off in the way it should have.
And his voice is going to be heard?
Without any question, his voice is currently heard. He's a member of our Senate. He is the caucus leader in Johannesburg. He's been critical to the running of that coalition. And like all ActionSA leaders, he engages us in good faith with the interests of the party at mind, and we listen to his views implicitly.
And just one last question before I say goodbye. What if Bongani Baloyi came back today and said, I've given this a rethink, I'd like to come back?
I mean, I wouldn't possibly know, and it wouldn't possibly be my decision, because contrary to his story, this isn't a dictatorship. It's a party with structures, the Senate being our highest decision-making body. But at the end of the day, I imagine that would be very difficult after everything that's been said, because it's very difficult to accept that people who claim to love an organization and believe in its values can make such contradictory statements, a year after they've joined the organization. So from that point of view, I would be very surprised by that outcome.
So local politics, nothing surprises me anymore these days. Michael, thank you very much for coming in.